So, Tom Coughlin, we'll turn it to you.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, and thanks to all the other folks who helped set up the webinar here. And I want to thank everyone who's participating. Technology is what's making this possible, and I see people who are here from all over the world. So I'm really glad actually to have changed the time on this particular meeting. We've had two meetings before this. The first one we focused on enhancing the value of IEEE membership and discussing on that. The second one was talking about enabling active and effective sections, IEEE sections at the local level. And this third one here, we're going to focus. I'm open to questions and all sorts of things, but in particular, strengthening IEEE's connection to industry. Our next one, which is going to be at the same time on the 27th, so the same day, same time next week, is going to be have a focus on helping to make IEEE global and diverse. And then there may be one more coming up, but it's probably going to be sometime later in August, uh, talking about getting a spirit of adventure in the IEEE. And so one, kind of inspired by the fact that we've just had two private space launches, the beginning of space tourism and mankind's becoming, hopefully, finally becoming a space-going species, and other types of adventures that technology are making possible. So I'm really glad to see all of you here. What we're trying to make this really like a town hall meeting, in which all the participants can have their say and ask questions and make comments and that kind of thing. I'm just going to have a few slides I'm going to show here just to kind of set the stage on things as I see it. But really, I'm trying to, I've got some ideas, but also I want to hear what you guys think and what your ideas are. So just to get started here, we're going to talk about strengthening IEEE's connection to industry. So IEEE was founded by people in industry. Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Alva Edison, Nikola Tesla were founders and early members of the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, which is one of the organizations that in 1963 became the IEEE. And we're, as engineers and technologists, because not all people in IEEE are engineers, and not all of them are electrical engineers, but we do all work with the practical applications of physical laws. Oftentimes, the best things that we do are when we use those methods to meet human needs. And that's what businesses do. Businesses are industries that are driven by the practical applications of technology, the kind of businesses that many of us are engaged in. And those technology-oriented businesses have been strong supporters of engineering societies in the past. And we really need that support of these industries and companies today. But we've been losing members in industry, which is one of our biggest connections to industry in general. We've lost a significant percentage of our industrial members over the last 20 years. And this loss of members reflects changes in a lot of things in the engineering profession, in the practices of companies that employ engineers. Many of the older companies that were staunch supporters of IEEE, some of them are gone, they've been acquired, they certainly have changes in management in their structure. And also, it reflects maybe the ability of IEEE to be flexible enough and to change with the times to provide value to these companies today and to their employees in ways like they were able to in the past. They're going to be different, but at least we should have an orientation towards doing that. And if we continue to lose our connections to industry, we lose our relevance to the people and organizations who generate wealth from technology. And that's not good. It's not good for IEEE as a whole. It's not good for our educational activities. It's not good for technical activities. And it's not good for academics, because industry supports the work at universities. They hire the students trained at universities. For IEEE to provide the greatest value for its academic members, it also needs to maintain strong connections to industry. Many people in industry see IEEE as primarily an academic organization focused on research, and often very, very focused research, which it's not easy to see the practical application of that. And many people in industry are looking for immediate practical applications of technology, or things that are dealing with broader issues, for instance, than much research ends up being about. And research is very important. It's the way in which we find out new things. But to fund research, you need to be working with the people that have the money. Companies generate wealth. They have money. They're the people where ultimately a lot of research money comes from. So if we're going to retain our value for both our academic and industry members, We need to provide values for companies and their members in industry, as well as provide value for our academic members as well. And I think that's something we really need to address. So, some ideas here. This is not exhaustive. I know that other people have ideas. In fact, I've gotten some comments since, in some of the comments I've got back on LinkedIn and Facebook, for example, on other ideas. But here's some things how we might attract industry back to the IEEE. So, for instance, consider developing new types of electronic information services. We actually have a big repository of the world's engineering and technology literature that IEEE curates. Could we use machine learning capabilities to help members find the most useful information for their particular interests and needs? Could we create, for example, if you will, very personalized sort of journals or publications that directly address problems that, say, a practical person is dealing right now, and can sort through all these different sources, both within and outside the IEEE, and sort of put together, if you will, your own private publication that helps you to make decisions, helps you to find out the things you need to find out. Maybe this could be a very, so that's one of the things we could do. Maybe learning from the pandemic. I think there's a lot of people in industry that it's hard for them to travel, and virtual events may be and continuing that is probably a very good idea in terms of continuing to maintain that connection with industry. That also, I think, can attract more people. So even if you have a physical event, to have a virtual side of it, so it's a hybrid event, that you can bring in people. You can charge them less because their costs are less. They don't have to travel. They don't have to stay in hotels. So it's easier for them to participate to the extent that they can. It's not quite the same. And I think that's a way, if we did this right, and for the right kind of conferences, it could be a real draw to bring people in industry to want to participate in the IEEE. So those are some ideas I've got, and some more ideas. Some things have been tried in participation of IEEE and IEEE members in industry-wide activities, for instance, in trade shows. Trade shows and industry events at various places. We should be there. We should be involved in that. We should have speakers at those events. We should have exhibits, I believe, things like that. So we really have a presence. We should be working on initiatives with industry, for example. We could leverage folks from the roadmaps group in IEEE Future Directions. I think there's roadmaps, if done right, could have real value, perhaps even an economic value if you do it the right way, to bring in people associated with companies, to get those companies to pay attention to IEEE, to see its relevance. Could we create, I know there's work going on in standards that are bringing in new types of standards activities that could have value to modern industry, for example. So another area I think is important. And there's also this concept of local groups, which is to allow sections to create ad hoc groups, which can be easily created and dissolved, at the pleasure of the section chair. That could include things like, for instance, a group within a company, in a town, in a section. We could promote IEEE senior memberships, for example, within that company, or fellow nominations for that company. Could maybe get involved in a group that's related to standards activity, or many, many potentially other things. So in general, can IEEE do more to help our industry members with their career development, finding work, etc.? And one comment I did get was, it was maybe a student or graduate student, but if IEEE did a lot more in terms of helping to create opportunities for students to connect with companies for internships or for work, and that was directly tied to being an IEEE member for those people. First of all, it engages them, and it shows them the larger value of IEEE besides just being a student club. So maybe there's things like that we could do a better job of, and organize something. It's a much more material and much more long-term in terms of the infrastructure to make that possible. That's another idea. So I'm really interested, though. These are some things that ideas I've come across, some things I've thought about, but I'm interested in your ideas or experiences as well, to create greater value for industry and members from industry for their participation in the IEEE. And again, to achieve its full potential, IEEE must have values who put technology into practice, as well as those who develop new technologies. And I really feel that we need to take important steps to make that happen. So with that, I just want to, I'm going to leave this up here for a little bit, but open to start doing questions. And again, if you put them in the Q&A, that's good. Or if you want to ask a question in person or make a comment in person, you can raise your hand on the participants. Over on the right-hand side from your name, if you get the participants there, there's a way of raising your hand. So just to let you know. Or actually, I think it's down at the bottom. There's a raise your hand feature. This was a picture at, I can't remember what year it was, but it was at the Consumer Electronics Show. The robot is called Robo Sapiens. And actually, I had, let's see, this might have been, uh, I think I saw this at the 2000, this actually was on display at several IEEE events, including the 2014 Sections Congress in Amsterdam, where they had the Robo Sapiens. It's an outfit, I believe it's out of Cornwall or Wales in the UK, that makes this thing, and it's basically an animatronic device. It's got a person behind it, but it's really kind of cool. Interacting with what looks like a robot.
Right. Tom, there was a point mentioned here. We're talking about industry, but also what about government and government organizations, national labs, agencies? How the IEEE interacts with government? Maybe talk about our government liaison person and how he's provided value and information to the members.
Yes, that's a really good question. I think that there is definitely a need. IEEE has members from many different communities, and government and various government organizations are important parts of that. I think there's a number of things we could do. I was president of IEEE USA, which is involved in public policy. So they actually would, put together public policy statements, things of that sort, on things that IEEE and its members would be interested in for the U.S., the U.S. Congress, for example, or for the Supreme Court, sometimes, depending on the topics. So I think it's very important for IEEE to be involved in those kind of public policy activities of various sorts. And there may even be things at the local level that we should be involved in. Kim, if you remember, Kim and I, and actually Jeff, are all members of the Consultants Network Silicon Valley. In 2019, California passed a bill called AB5, which the way it was written, it may have impacted consultants' ability to work in California. And so we organized events around discussion of that, and also I and a few other people made trips to Sacramento to talk to the legislators about that, so they understood our issues and some possible suggestions on ways in which that might be mitigated.
And there were also moves at the national level in Congress for some things along this vein as well.
Oh, that's true. Right now, in fact, there is something that was passed by Congress. It's sitting in front of the Senate. It's not clear that it's going to get voted on, but it actually could be even more restrictive than AB5 was for consultants potentially to be able to do their work. Basically, it's trying to force everyone to be an employee versus be able to be independent.
Right.
Um, but I think there's a broader issue here as well. For instance, if you had, and some of these ideas we talked about may be very useful in government as well. For instance, if you have a large government lab, could they have a local group in the section that's close to them that focuses, as an IEEE group, but focuses on issues that are have a great interest to them, and gives them a forum to get together and do something as IEEE related to them. I think that's a possibility. Some of these tools could be used for that. I think public, being having people involved in appropriate public policy that makes sense, for folks within the IEEE in general, is a interesting idea. I know that there's some conferences that there are IEEE conferences that have some sessions that focus on people from industry with particular needs, and sometimes even with clearances. So I believe we need to have a good connection with our government folks, as well. Our government technologists applying technology, for regulation, for safety and health, and other things as well. I think that's important also. Um, let's see. Thoughts on government. Okay, there's two of them there. Defense and aerospace industry in particular are going through a digital transformation revolution. Yes, and that's a really interesting point. And in general, IEEE should be all over this idea of digital transformation, which is basically the digitization of of the way people do business, which is also being happening within the government itself. They're undergoing their own situations, and we should be more engaged with that practical transformations, ideas around that, maybe standards related to that, and its applications as well. Maybe that's even a road mapping project. Is where most of our road mapping stuff has been sort of at the device level, but if we get into the systems, for instance, road mapping of systems level things, or even broader, maybe technical transformations, maybe an interesting thing to be looking at. And again, I think a lot of these answers are across the IEEE, not just in one part of the IEEE. And that's our strongest possibilities, I think, are in working together between our organizational units to meet particular needs and particular interests.
And Tom, Paul Walk, who asked that question, has a great deal of personal experience, both from the national lab side as well as industry side, and his work currently falls right into that area.
Yeah, yeah. So if you've got, by the way, if you've got some ideas of things we could be doing, I certainly am really interested in hearing those, and I've been, as I get comments, I try to collect them in a file, so if I do get elected, I could start looking at what can I do around some of these, which of these are about the best ideas, and what can I do around some of these things. There's,
That's when you get elected, not
oh,
if you
sorry.
get elected.
Thank you, Kim. They have a question here. Let's see. How do you think IEEE student branches and student chapters could be integrated into this framework to facilitate linkage between the industry, the university, and IEEE? First of all, student branches and their chapters are supposed to be connected with their sections. And I believe that IEEE should be a community and at the local section level, that means the sections really need to reach out and connect with their local universities. And probably that means they go to them and give them talks and tell them about what IEEE is about, but also to bring them into the local section activities, and possibilities of doing things like I was suggesting. Maybe we could do a better job of helping find connecting companies with internships and jobs to the university students who are members, and provide real value and engagement, for our IEEE student members from the get-go. If we help you get jobs, I think you'll look upon the IEEE as being kind of a good organization to be part of. And I think that's one of the things we should do. And part of what I believe that IEEE needs to be a community that we do try to help each other with things like that, like employment and uh, uh, issues that relate to our livelihood. It's not just the technology; it's about the people that do technology as well that we need to focus on.
If I can add a comment on that too, because I totally agree on that viewpoint. I've primarily been a consultant all my career, but I did spend 2 years teaching at Santa Clara University,
Hmm.
and from that point, section chair during that time, and then also from my own time as students. Yeah, I think we as IEEE and at the section level need to reach out to the universities and pull them in. Primarily, the only time university students kind of came to the sections was looking for financial support for like Formula SAE and projects like that. Big projects that were really good and of real interest, but where they needed help. And that's a great thing to do.
Hmm.
But we can do a lot more than that. And I
Yeah, I
think
believe so.
what you said about internships, that's another one that really resonates and really has not been done in the past. That would provide value to industry as well as
Exactly.
providing value to the students who benefit from that.
And
And
actually,
that's one.
yeah, and
Go
that's a
ahead.
comment I actually got from one of my LinkedIn posts, somebody suggesting that, and I thought it was a great idea. That's why I mentioned it. So I won't take credit for that idea, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see us do something like that. There's a question here. Many companies are moving to the use of gig workers in order to quickly scale up and scale down in different technologies. Is there a way for IEEE to create affinity groups that companies could turn to when they need to quickly scale up? There's an interesting idea. In fact, we have something called the Consultants Network, um, that might be a really good organization to spin something like that off from. In other words, those are people that are, if consultants, contractors, they're people that basically run their own business, and often, and most often, actually have many different clients. So they do move from thing to thing. So We could probably do a much better job of developing our consult. Listen to this, Kim and Jeff as well, but are developing our consultants networks, at least in the U.S. There's some in some other countries, but it was started by IEEE USA. But using those consultant networks as ways of maybe creating connections to companies that are looking for things and do a much stronger job of doing that, or have that be part of IEEE's message to industries. We've got these groups of people that essentially could help you for part-time work, for intermittent activities, and they have great specializations and things that they're very familiar with, and they're skilled, and some of these consultant networks, I know that the CNSV does, is actually part of the things we do is help train people on how to be a consultant, run your own business, and
Exactly.
things like that as well. So I think that's a really good idea. That might be a really good idea.
And since several of us who are panelists here today just happen to be members of the Consultants Network of Silicon Valley, you'll see in the chat californiaconsultants.org
Hmm.
is the URL for that group, and that's Consultants Network of Silicon Valley is what CNSV acronym stands for. But there is also consultants networks throughout the United States.
And also, I hear there's some in India too, some places in
Ah,
India. So, for
okay.
example, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, there's another one here. As you noted, IEEE USA is an active public policy program. The European Public Policy Committee also addresses public policy issues. Should IEEE do more to encourage public policy efforts in other places and to help public policy groups collaborate when appropriate? I very much believe we should do that. We almost should create sort of a public policy infrastructure. And it may be at the subnational level. For instance, when you get things like this AB5 in California, or maybe in some other state, or a country, in Region 8 or something like that, actually maybe give aid and methods for how people can create new public policy groups to deal with issues as they come up, and to make sure that our voices are heard and they're taken into account. When decisions are being made by government bodies in particular, we need to make sure that the technology community is not excluded or not considered. We need to be seen as important parts of that overall community, because you know on the industry side in particular, those are the people that generate new wealth. They create new opportunities. They find ways to meet human demands that people will pay money for. And they need to, and we don't want to destroy that capability. We'd like to strengthen that. So how can we do that? And that's where we might have a stronger IEEE wide public policy approach that helps maybe even on an ad hoc basis for groups to be able to do that where it's appropriate to do so. It's a good suggestion to start going to conferences and participate, but who owns that? Who is assigned that task? Uh,
And does that mean to motivate that action or some other aspect of ownership?
so the idea of conferences, especially these conferences that are hybrid, is that I think it opens up the possibility. In certainly during the pandemic when you couldn't meet physically, for more people to participate in events. Now it depends upon how good a job of publicity you do for an event, an outreach to the people that would be interested in it. But if you do a good job, I was part of a conferences committee that last year that it was actually created before COVID. But when COVID hit, then everything went virtual, and that became one of the main focuses of it. Some conferences did better than they ever had in terms of attendance, and ended up with net revenues that were about what they had before, because they were able to get more, even though because their costs were less for the virtual component of the conference, or all virtual conference, and they could charge less, but they got more people to participate in it. Some conferences didn't do as well, but some did very well, as good as they had done before that. And I think there's a model there for how we could do things in the future. And I think having a virtual component to IEEE events, now that we've become familiar with the technologies of doing it, and finding cost-effective ways of tying that into physical events, which has its own challenges. I think that's very important for the IEEE going forward, and it enables more people to be able to participate in our events. Now, the other side of that is getting the word out to those people. And that's something IEEE needs to do a better job of publicizing who we are, what we do, and what the opportunities are. And I think we need to do things to create a better perception of that. Okay, UN has set up a number of, oh, we're getting some great questions here. A
Okay.
number of sustainable development goals. These are impacting new product development in many different fields. Could IEEE create technology recommendations that align with these sustainable development goals? I think we very much could do something. And I'm kind of thinking, maybe there's elements of the Standards Association, IEEE Standards SA, that could be part of that. In general, yeah, because a lot of that I think of tying to standards, but also into maybe roadmap groups, things of that sort that we could be thinking of. And this is sort of the higher order roadmap, going beyond devices into systems and even broader implementations. There's possibilities. So I think there are things that we could do that could give us allow us to play a role in practical application of sustainable development goals, or pros and cons, trade-offs, things of that sort, which may be important in any kind of implementation.
Yeah, Jill has a question there that I think is
Yeah.
really relevant about the large number, some 40 IEEE societies and 20 IEEE communities. Which ones are growing? Which ones are shrinking? Which ones are highly relevant to industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of societies, and we've got many communities. As I mentioned, there's about 40 IEEE societies and about 20 communities. Some are growing, some are shrinking, and some of those that you would think by their topic should be growing are actually shrinking. And it's not just what the particular society is about, I think, that determines it. It's also how it's being run, what its focuses are, and how good a connection it has with, in many cases, with industry. There are some societies I know that should be very strongly connected to industry, but they've not been able to do it. And I think that this is something that we need to be addressing: is how can we get those better connections? We don't want to lose the academic. The excellence of the academic work and things of that sort. So I think we need to maintain the value to academics, but I think we can, on top of that, bring much greater value in for people in industry and invigorate or all of IEEE, including potentially the societies and technical councils. But also, we might want to think, if things are shifting and interests are shifting, we have to be a dynamic organization to be able to respond to that. Maybe we need to be able to make new groups that can do something. That's one of the possibilities of these local groups, is they can be formed at the section level. They represent some sort of interest that people at that level have, and they may or may not fit into any existing societies. They may be some new technology. In Santa Clara Valley, we actually have a few examples of these that have been around for a while, though they don't have access to the tools that the local group concept would give you. We have one on sustainability. We've got one on technology history. And I think there's an entrepreneurship one as well. And there may be one other one I'm forgetting about. But there's also groups that have been formed with some of the future directions activities like blockchain. There apparently have been 40 communities around the world with local blockchain groups, including Santa Clara Valley. There's folks in the valley here doing that. So I think that there's there's a lot more we can do to create more flexibility in our organization, to allow for organic growth, grassroots as well as top down, engagement with technology and with the people who are involved in technology. And this also again ties into that industrial connection. So, we could talk about the particular society stuff, what they're doing, but I think there's a bigger question here on creating dynamic capabilities within the IEEE to adjust to meet the needs of our communities.
And if I can add a comment along that line as well, one thing I see with IEEE societies, there can be a huge difference between the organization at the top level, the IEEE level, versus at the local level or the
Mm-hmm.
section level.
Mm-hmm.
Like one thing that I'm involved in is VTS, Vehicular Technology Society.
Mm-hmm.
Well, come on. All kinds of stuff is going on in that area in terms of autonomous vehicles, electric cars, electric motorcycles. Silicon Valley is a hotbed of this activity, and yet we have struggled to get people involved in the Vehicular Technology Society. And then I think, so that's at the local level here for us in a large section. But it also goes up to what's kind of coming down, shall we say, from the top, where the Vehicular Technology Society magazines are put out, where conferences are organized, things like that. So there's both parts, and the local level is often what the member sees, but the top level is sort of what sets the tone, sets the agenda, for the bigger picture of things. Um, I think another thing that really helps with societies that I've seen is the Distinguished Lecturer Program. And Tom's been a part of the Distinguished Lecturer Program for what, consumer electronics or?
Yeah, what was the Consumer Electronics Society is now the Consumer Technology Society. I was a distinguished lecturer. So my field is digital storage and memory and their applications. And I wrote a book on digital storage and memory and consumer electronics. It's actually in its second edition with Springer. And for several years, I actually was a distinguished lecturer for the at that time, Consumer Electronics Society. And I gave talks all over the world on digital storage and memory and consumer electronics, how they designed it in, what are the technologies available, how do they work, what are the trade-offs, all this kind of stuff. So I was trying to focus on, the practical aspects of how these technologies are being used for consumer products. And for me, it was a really great experience. I got to meet, new colleagues and folks from all over the world, which, led to some long-term friendships and connections with folks. But also, I think it was valuable for those sections as well. And I tried to do this, like, I ended up with a whole bunch in Europe. I made it like one trip, and I just went from one country to another giving talks. In Greece, for example, I gave a talk, and it was the first meeting of their Consumer Electronics Society chapter. And so I kind of helped. I was like the kickoff talk to get that going. That was pretty cool, being able to do that. And there was
Right.
another one, I think it was in Taiwan, where they had a chapter, but it hadn't been active for a while. I ended up giving my talk, and that was kind of like to try to help to invigorate that chapter. But there are DLs, and some of the DLs are more active than others. Some of them are more practical oriented, and some are very academic, focused on their particular things they know about. I think we need both.
Right.
And I think that that's actually something that we ought to be looking at in the societies is how can we get a good blend of industry-oriented speakers as well as the academic speakers, the
So
focused
Tom,
academic speakers.
that that actually that actually leads to a question that you are particularly well suited to address, and that fits very, very nicely with today's topic. And pardon me for joining late.
Well, good to see you,
But
Daniel.
you are not an academic. You're not a university professor, and you were not an academic university professor while you were a distinguished lecturer. Um, do you have a sense of how common that is, whether most DLs come from academia, whether we have a significant representation from industry among DL speakers who spend a year traveling the world giving talks?
It's a good question. I do not know the survey of all of the DL speakers. I would imagine though that the majority of them are academic, but I can't say that for sure. And I guess truth be told, I should say that I was for a while an adjunct professor for Santa Clara University with the Institute of Information Storage Technology for several years. So
Right.
I'm not, I've been in industry, and I was even in industry then, but I just want to, just make sure you know that.
Yeah, I've been an adjunct lecturer at
Yeah, yeah,
Santa
yeah,
Clara University too. A lot
yeah,
of us
exactly.
have, and it's a great experience. But I would not consider myself to be a university academic. I mean,
Right,
first, my
right.
publication record is not nearly strong enough for that. But I think you and I and many people are much more rooted in industry through our consulting work and also through, direct, shall we say, regular jobs with companies
Hmm.
prior and sometimes during that.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, my own perception is that many of the distinguished lecturers, at least ones that I've interacted with before, with
Mhm.
Tom being an exception to this, many of them are academics. Many of them are positioned relatively highly within the societies that they represent. but that's not always the case. And I think, Tom as president ought to really push for that, for getting more widespread involvement in that distinguished lecturer program from industry, and taking it to industry as well.
Certainly,
Pulling those folks in
our
as
local
speakers.
chapter of the Magnetic Society has a very high number of members who are active in local corporations and businesses, and I can assure you that within our chapter, talks are extremely well attended when they are delivered by somebody from one of the big players locally, whether it's
Right,
Western Digital
right.
or somebody from Seagate. We had, with the webinars, we had people calling in from Everspin. So for somebody like that to give one talk a year is one thing. For them to deliver 40 or 50 talks, they would lose their jobs unless their companies said, this is something that is of value to us. We are going to. So that's
Strategic.
where perhaps some kind of inquiry, it might be an interesting line of interrogation or of communication with industry to see under what conditions would you be willing to provide a distinguished lecture, and to what extent would that be of value to you?
Right.
Well, and the other thing is that, we've just had a year and a half of doing everything virtually,
Right.
and I think we should take advantage of that growing familiarity, both on the receiving side and the delivery side of doing that. I think that makes it possible, if you add that you can do it virtually instead of having to travel.
Right.
It opens up the possibility for a lot more people to be, for instance, lecturers, and also to do so at lower cost to the organizations doing it.
Yeah.
So,
That is so true, because when you
yeah,
did it, Tom, every one of those talks, invited talks, involved travel, and
yeah,
oftentimes international travel, right?
exactly. Yep.
And while there's tremendous value in face-to-face meetings, as we all know,
Yeah.
and I hope we get back to that, but I think the hybrid approach is got to be a big factor going forward.
I
That's
think so.
got to be something that we take advantage of.
And again, it doesn't replace the face to face. I miss
Not at
that.
all. Not at
I miss
all.
that even in locally going to local things in Santa Clara Valley. But it does offer us new options of how to do things. And for instance, Daniel, it doesn't take someone away from their jobs as much. They may have to
Right.
get up some ungodly hour, to do a webinar, right? But they don't have to travel to get there. So, I think there's we could use the technologies we've got, to help us to get more opportunities to get a broader mix of people engaged with the IEEE, and offer options for how you can do that. You can go, sometimes people go there physically, sometimes it's a virtual event. And this also gets into, are there new ways of volunteering, because everyone I know at least is like stretched on time. There's more things to do there than there's time during the day. Anything we can do to help our members, to be more effective and to be able to contribute without, destroying their life, their family relationships
Right.
and their jobs, would be very beneficial. I think we can take advantage of our technologies to help us to do that. Uh, and we've made steps towards that. We've got, micro volunteering projects and there's a new volunteering website where you can put your name down to do things, and then people can look at that list, and access it. But I don't think it's been publicized as well as it should be, and I don't think it's being used as well as it should be. We've got to do a lot better job. I mean, IEEE has a lot of resources, a lot of clever people with a lot of ideas, but we sometimes do not seem to do a good job of making sure people can find out about that. And I think we need to do a better job of that.
Yeah, I would totally agree on that front. I was going to mention another avenue for getting industry involvement, and one that can have very special benefit to that, and that's on the side of early stage companies.
Hmm.
I've met with two
Yeah.
CEOs of startup companies recently. When they're out of stealth mode and they're looking to become better known, and they're looking for funding and things
Hmm.
like this, making talks to groups of ours, and the publicity that comes from it, how it's publicized on the e-grid. 30,000 some odd here see those announcements for the things. It's a way to get visibility and publicity that can be very valuable to the small company. So look at it from both ways. Look at it for what, like Daniel said, look at it for where it provides a strategic benefit to the company.
Well, and the other thing is if you give a talk at a local chapter meeting, that's in the field that you're working in, that also may be a way of recruiting.
Right.
And I know that there are, at least in Santa Clara Valley, and I think in many other sections, that, and it should be a best practice, I think, in general, is that, say at the beginning of the meeting, I know the Consumer Technology Society chapter, when it was live, at the very beginning of the meeting, they had some things they went through. And one of these was, does anyone have any jobs? Is anyone looking for jobs? And we oftentimes would have somebody say, I've got a company, I'm looking for someone to do, some circuit design, or things like that, or yeah, I'm available. This is the kind of stuff that I do, and I think there were real connections that were made doing that. We could do, these are little things at the very local level we can even do that could help in terms of that connections to industry and the value of being parts of IEEE groups. There's a comment in here. IEEE could create a speakers bureau to industry on a variety of technical topics. I think that's a very interesting idea. What if we could do something that actually was speakers for industry
Right.
versus speakers for chapters?
Right.
So I think there's some interesting possibilities there. Get world-class experts on practical applications of technology who could talk. Maybe even go through our list of speakers and find these folks, and then if they're willing to maybe offer them as to talk to companies as part of it. And by the way, that may help them if they do consulting work, maybe to help get work at the company too. See, there's lots of things in this stuff that can benefit us in our careers as well as benefit our organization overall, which, by the way, helps us then to have the money to be part of IEEE and to continue to develop it. Let's see.
I mean, as a consultant, I'm obviously a big advocate of providing consulting services to companies, but it's oftentimes a great fit. It's where a company needs help strategically in a certain area for a period of time, but they may not be ready for a full-time position in that, or may not be able to, financially put it into the budget. Consulting and help of that sort, focused help of that sort from an expert in a given area can be very valuable.
hmm And this also potentially ties into some of these public policy things, is that, particularly for those of us who basically run our own business, who have multiple clients, like, several of us who are on in the consultants network, for example, is that we can, if we can tie in the companies that work with us, and we've run into things like an AB5 or the PRO Act, in Congress in the U.S., maybe even together, IEEE together with some of these companies could go in and say, this is, there's a real problem here. And, there's one consultant I know down in Southern California with AB5. He was an expert in optical technologies, and nobody worked for, had enough work for somebody to be a permanent employee working on optical things, but yet they had optical stuff as part of their systems.
Right.
So he would service a number of companies. He was basically their optics expert, and they brought him in. He had a lot of clients, and they brought him in when they wanted him. AB5 directly hurt him in doing that. But if we could get those companies, as well as if IEEE or some part of IEEE, maybe the more general public policy group, could work across the companies as well as their own members and consultants network in this case, for example, to lobby on this, or to say there's a real issue here that you need to take us into account. You're not just dealing with Uber drivers, and Lyft drivers. You're talking about people that actually help startups leverage themselves and become successful. You're talking about people that serve a specialized function for multiple companies. You got to take, one size does not fit all. And if you're trying to address one issue, make sure that you don't have a lot of collateral damage in the course of doing that.
And I'm going to mention, since you said the word lobbyists, which sometimes sounds like a dirty word, but can actually be very valuable here. So IEEE has a congressional liaison, Russ Harrison, and every 2 weeks, I believe, Russ does a YouTube live type broadcast, and then it's recorded. They're all available on IEEE USA with federal government type information. And some of the things that I've found particularly valuable out of that are things like involving SBIRs. What's happening? What would infrastructure
But you better explain SBIRs because not everybody here is in the United States, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, small business innovative research grants are available in the U.S. and I really don't know what's available in other countries, but this is, for U.S. ones, things that Russ Harrison puts out can be very beneficial. Would definitely encourage you to check it out, and I'd love to know what's available in other countries, if there is similar things like that, where government maybe has opportunity to provide funding to early stage businesses for research, things like that.
And these are ways that this helps these companies potentially, and helps small organizations, but also helps our members. We could do, I think, a better job of helping our members find new opportunities, of various sorts, or even explore them or develop their capabilities. This could be part of our sort of continuing education. Continuing education is on technical topics, but it also might be on doing cross-disciplinary work, that span or finding analogous applications of a technology in new ways, and helping people develop themselves to be able to participate in new industries, new technologies, leverage things they already know about, are familiar with, have expertise in, but to figure out how to apply that into new areas. And I think we could do a better job of that. And I think we could do a better job then of helping companies know about people, if they're willing, they're willing to let that be known, that here's some people who have these kind of knowledge and have had this experience and training, because they may have value to those people, to hire them, maybe hire them as an employee, or hire them as somebody to work contract. I'm just sort of blue skying how, things we might think about doing here. But let's see, I think we got a new question.
There's a comment from Raymond on
Ah,
the
here he goes.
EU,
EU.
European Union.
Yeah,
Maybe you
yeah.
could hit that.
Yeah, as numerous grants for technology development startups, in particular with research, with regard to those UN sustainable development goals. I think it's a great idea, and in fact, we may want to consider things like that in the U.S. As well. For some of these sustainable development goals, and there probably are things. I know we have at least one person who I recognize is from Japan. They probably have similar kind of things where there's for small grants of money for people trying to get an idea off the ground, small business, things like that as well. I'm pretty sure they've got things of that like that as well. And IEEE, if they're technology oriented, we should really be engaged, to the extent it makes sense, in those activities, and let our members know about those activities and opportunities.
Do you know if India, China, other organizations, other countries, sorry, that are in Region 9, Region 10, anything that you're aware of in those areas?
You mean for doing that?
Yeah, for this kind of
Uh,
thing.
I'm pretty sure they exist. I don't know, particularly the details about them though.
That's probably something we ought to dig into. That would
Hmm.
be good information for the Tom Coughlin campaign here.
Yep, you're right. It would be. And another thing in general is industry engagement going to be different in different countries? We have different cultural practices,
Right.
and I think that's something that we certainly. I don't know all the nuances. I know some things, but I don't know all the nuances of how businesses operate in various countries. And many of these companies end up being international, and they follow some international norms, but still they've got a lot of the people that work there are from particular cultures. And how can we do a better job of understanding industry engagement, and accommodating different practices in different parts of the world? It's probably different in Japan, it's different in India than it would be, for instance, in the United States. And it might even be somewhat different in different parts of the United States. Not everything is like Silicon Valley, for example, where a number of us are from. So we need to take that into account, I think, in terms of how we do engagement. It's to some extent, we should be listening almost more than we talk, and listening in a way that we ask the question, asking the questions and listening to the answers, finding out from that what we could do and how we could do it. When we talk to industry, I think we need to do a lot more of that first to help us develop our strategies and carry them out in order to achieve goals of a greater connection to industry. and by means of that, invigorating the IEEE and increasing its value to its members. So let's see. Now, when I was director of Region 6, I'll tell you a few things that we did to try to get broader connection to industry. And actually, regions or sections could leverage some of these ideas. One of the things is we gave awards to companies, and we gave several awards. We part of it was just an excuse to get together with and meet folks who were involved in industry in our region. You know, this is the Western United States. There's a lot of companies there. A lot of wealth is generated by technology. And so we'd create awards, you know, and we'd present them and go and meet the folks and get their business cards and make some connections. So one of the things is getting your direct connections with these folks and
Right.
establishing relationships. Another thing we did was I worked with the IEEE membership, and we looked up all the people who were executives. We tried to find people who identified themselves executives in companies that worked in industry, and they were members but not senior members. And then we made a campaign to nominate them and make them senior members. So again, a good excuse to reach out and connect with folks. So like Eric Schmidt, you know, the former CEO of Alphabet and Google, was one of these people. So we made him we were able to make him a senior member rather than just a regular member. And so that helped when we wanted to have some conversations with Google on maybe doing a membership campaign with them. His office, at least I had his email. Well, I was still at Google. His office was able to get us connected in with the HR folks to set up a meeting and then actually create an initiative with them. So another example of things you can do and how you can leverage the resources we have, like who are our members, to do stuff. So those are just a few examples of things that I've tried to do. In that case, as a region director. I'm just trying to see if we got any more comments here. Let's see. And the other thing is, how might industry engagement be different in a smaller section than in a larger section? So a smaller section, for instance, may be based around a university, for example, or might be just, it's in a geographic area. They have probably less industries involved than a larger section. They may have a more narrow focus in terms of the people that are part of the organization, and so the opportunities are going to be different. I think in terms of engaging with industry, and one of the things we might do, and I know that there's Brian Berg, who's a member of our consultants network. I think when he was the Santa Clara Valley section chair, he actually went to the some business groups meetings. Let's see, small bit. No, there's anyway. I can't remember the name of the organization, but there's small business meetings in the Santa Clara Valley, and just introduced himself. And I think doing things like that, especially if you're at a smaller level, Chamber of Commerce, that's the word I was looking for. So going to your local Chamber of Commerce and talking to them about the IEEE, could be an interesting way of reaching out to local industry. And also for them to get awareness that there are people who are your kind of technologists who are in that area, and may lead to some new interactions. So things to be done at the local level, even for small sections, I think. And for larger sections, I think that's a good idea as well. But of course, you've got a lot more opportunities. There's a lot more businesses and a lot more different things going on you can connect with.
Tom, there's also some things in chat. Certainly pick and choose things that you'd like to comment on.
I think there's some comments on Explore there. And I think we could do some models for Explore. I know there's been a
And
number
what
of
is
people.
Explore?
Oh,
What is it?
Explore is the portal to access all of IEEE's most of IEEE's publications, and it usually has a paywall. Although there are open access materials and increasing number of those that the author pays to get it published, but then anybody can read it for free. So there is developing more and more of that, and particularly where there's government money involved in the research done leading to that paper, it's becoming more and more common for that to happen. But
Do you support that? Do you support that move?
well, it's happening. I mean, we've
Well, I
got.
mean, are you in favor of it? Like some people in I've heard some people in IEEE say, we get so much revenue from Explore, this will be a harmful thing for us. And I think some drag their feet on that, but not you, right?
Well, I think we need to go beyond just traditional publications. And I think the real value is, especially because a lot of these publications are very, very specialized, looking at some, some things have a greater, a broader value, right, and a more practical value. And but some things are very, very specialized, and only if you're looking for exactly that would be of interest. And I think we need to, I think the real answer, I think open access is happening. It's going to become more common. There's accessing the original content is going to become something where it's going to cost less or nothing to do. Okay, and I think IEEE needs to work around that, and we need to be developing, I think, new things that could provide a higher level of value. For instance, what if we used artificial intelligence methods with our vast sea of publications and also external documents to help answer particular questions. For instance, what if I wanted to find a broad survey of everything that's been done on a particular topic to look for things that haven't been done? So I'm looking for a new research area.
Right.
Could I use AI to help me identify that and to look for maybe things that I could do something that hasn't been done before? Could I use it to go across a broad spectrum of content? And I'm interested in a particular things, and it just pulls out from all of these documents to create sort of a personalized journal or magazine for you with everything that looks like and might be of interest to you for what you're doing, for you to think about. Or perhaps even if we can go to a higher level, that can actually create recommendations of, say, ways to solve a particular problem based upon the sea of literature and experiences, published experiences that are out there.
I really love that idea because, as I recall, IEEE members get something like 3 publications per month that they can download, I believe, at no cost. So there's a benefit of membership because these are normally $35 each.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I've struggled with as a small business and not having an Explore subscription, not being, when I was in a university, I got access that way, but when I was not in a university,
Mm-hmm.
it is difficult to search and identify publications that are relevant, but to really look at them, $35 a whack. So your AI idea could be really powerful, I think, for helping to focus this down and look a little deeper, look under the skin.
Yeah,
I have to
yeah,
buy a paper to look at it.
yeah, yeah.
Now
But
you could look on the inside and provide that information.
what
I
if we
think
could
that
what
would
if we
be
could make tools that help you to find what you're looking for
exactly.
faster and less expensive?
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
that would be a true innovation.
Well, and if we and I think the thing is, if we make better tools to answer people's needs, and we combine that with better engagement with them, we'll find new opportunities for making money, new opportunities for for bringing in money into the IEEE, but also for our IEEE members. In other words, being an IEEE member will be advantageous to you in terms of your ability to function in the industry, in your industry. I think
Exactly.
we really could make that happen.
Exactly. And that's something you would support as president, right?
I believe I don't know how much you can get done in a year, but I definitely believe that we should be starting to move down the path of making things like this possible.
Well, you're president-elect for one year, you're
Yes,
president for the next year, and then are you past president for the year after that?
you are. Yeah.
So you've got 3 years to make things happen here, Tom.
My goal is to do as much as I can in the time that I have. So, I think we're a little bit beyond our time here, but I really enjoyed the discussion today, and I thank everyone who's joined us. There's some great comments and questions out there, so we should capture. Can we capture the Q&A?
Oh
I
yeah,
know we can
yeah.
capture the chat.
We do capture that. I would say to folks, nobody raised their hand, or if they
Yeah.
did, I missed you. So we would certainly have been glad for you to put your question out live. And here, as we wrap up, you've got that last chance to do that.
Hmm.
But there may be questions that need to be further addressed, and that's something we will look at doing. Tom will try to go through those things and see if there's additional comments, things to go back to
Yeah.
the person who posted, and things that will be useful for the folks that are here. Also, all of you who joined, you'll get a follow-up message from Zoom thanking you for attending. It'll have my contact information if you want to get in touch with me, something that you can do for the future. And I would say town hall number 4 is set for next Tuesday, July 27th, also 8 a.m. Pacific time. That is
We're focusing on making IEEE a global diverse organization. So
right. And I'll put Tom's photo up here again, but mainly for the URL here. Notice
I
tomcoughlin.com/IEEE. You'll get information on Tom's thoughts and his goals for the program. You'll also be able to register right there for town hall number 4 for any future town halls. Sign up for emails. I believe there's an email sign up there as well, right, Tom?
there is,
Blog
yeah,
posts.
yep.
You'll get it all right here, tomcoughlin.IEEE. And remember, I did also put in the chat the Facebook URL,
Oh, yeah.
facebook.com/Tom.Coughlin.IEEE. Please add your thoughts there. This is where we're trying to get some traction and get much greater visibility, get in front of folks in other countries that have been less able to join the town halls.